Okay, let me know if you guys can hear me, if it all sounds good, both in the Discord and the live chat, just to get input from multiple people. Let's see. Make sure everything's ready. Sorry, I am like 5 minutes late or something. Just wanted to make sure all the notes were extra organized for this one. Okay. Everyone, it all sound good? Okay. Finally got some input there. It does sound good according to the people in the chats. All right, so welcome to the end of January loose ends. This is the monthly live stream I do where you guys can ask me absolutely anything. Patrons, of course, got to submit questions ahead of time, and I will be going through those and the subjects of the past month, subjects of the upcoming month, lingering thoughts I have from the content and news that came out over the past few weeks, and then also answering tipped questions in the live chat. I'll go through all those Patreon questions, the pre-prepared subjects, and just intermingle with whatever questions I see on the live stream as they pop up. So I do this usually for about an hour or two. If you have a question, submit it now so that you don't have it missed, and if it's a tipped question, it pops up more. But yeah, let's see here. So there's actually quite a few things to talk about this week. Before I get into it, let me get through the sponsor, which of course this is sponsored by Micro Center. They've sponsored every live stream for like the past year. Come build your own true love at Micro Center at the Build Your Own PC department. Micro Center staff is prepared for great savings all Valentine's month to help you build and fall in love with your new PC. Whether you're a seasoned PC builder or a first-time shopper, Micro Center is there to help with their knowledgeable associates in a wide range of parts. Like, for example, I saw on the news, the 7700X is like $300 on Amazon and Newegg, which is pretty crazy. But right now it's like $340 and it comes with 32 gigabytes of 6,000 mega transfer per second RAM. So you get a $140 RAM kit. It's basically $200 at Micro Center if you thought those deals were good. And so anyways, if you want to customize or you just want them to build something for you, they can for a fee. Micro Center will assemble it and have it out the door for you if you're busy. So again, February is build your own month at Micro Center. Shop their great deals. They're competitive with any news you're seeing on the web from any other retailer. And make sure you click the links in the description for Micro Center as well. There's a few links there. Clicking on those links alone helps Moore's Law is dead a lot. And again, this is a great place to go any month to get the best deals. All right. Now I am through that. Let us get to the stories. So the first thing I wanted to talk about today is AD107 and AD106 from Lovelace. So links in the description. I tweeted this out last night. I have the die shots for the so far announced two smallest dies. Now, let's see. So in laptop, AD107 is going to be used, unfortunately, I would argue, for the 4050 and the 4060. And then AD106 is going to be used for the 4070. Now, I'm actually really excited I got to leak this before they came out because I don't know if you guys remember, but if I'm remembering correctly, GA107, the die used for the RTX 3050 and RTX 3050 Ti in laptops, I don't believe there were die shots of that like until a year after it came out for some like no one opened up their laptop, no one in a factory shared it. Like there every now and then you get these dies where there's no die shot online forever. And so I'm excited I got to leak it early so that we can compare and like verify the size of these things, without waiting a whole year, which is just weird to me. But the biggest thing, to take away from these die shots are, to be honest, I think you could have concluded this without the die shots. I mean, look at the 4070 laptop. It goes down to a 35-watt TDP and is 128-bit. That's not a high-end card, even if Nvidia is probably going to put it mostly in $2,000 laptops. But I verified that its die size is actually, I think, 190 millimeters squared or lower. I'm not going to say the exact numbers I read off of a spec sheet because they differ. So without going into it, it seems like Nvidia is slightly changing what the exact die size is based on which customer they're working with to I probably tell if someone's leaking, which was weird. It actually like delayed the leak for an hour as I like looked across a couple sources and then looked at Nvidia's publicly available die size information and said, why would they say this to this partner? And that's my conclusion. So the point is though, like it's like around 190 millimeter squared at most. And actually from what I've seen, it should be a bit smaller than that. And that makes AD107 or AD106, the thing used in the RTX 4070 laptop, smaller than the 1060, the 960, and the HD 7850, and honestly pretty close to a 5500 XT. Make no mistake about it here. The 4070 laptop chips, even if you count for the increased costs of the 4 nanometer silicon over like the previous 8 nanometer silicon, Nvidia is making an absolute killing on these things. In fact, one of my contacts laughed with me and said, "Do you think Nvidia is charging $1 per millimeter squared?" And I said, "Maybe, honestly, they might be for these stupid things." So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else there is to say. It's not that surprising. AD107 that's going to be used in the 4060 laptops, that's like an MX450 or actually arguably smaller, like MX250 type chip, like 750 Ti. Like I think almost the exact same die size as the 750 Ti. These things are dirt cheap for them, even if they're on the latest node. And I just think it's pathetic they're trying to sell them for, let's be honest, like $1,200 for like a 4050 half the time. And 2,000 for a 4070 that they should probably be calling the 4060 or maybe even less. I don't know. It's pretty sad. That's all I can really say about this. But I do have a reader mail here from a patron that I want to get to. Beefish writes in and he says, does Nvidia really think they can play chicken with the whole gaming GPU market? First, they bring no cost per frame improvements to desktop, or at least close to no increase, and the rest of the year doesn't look good. Then they bring an almost identical offering to laptop, where the choice is either exorbitant pricing or zero gen over gen raster or performance improvements. What are they going to do if or when, hopefully when, consumers reject this strategy? I don't really know. And I do some consulting, and this is a thing that's come up after um the Lovelace laptops were announced and their specs. They're like, what do you make of these things? And I think I've said this before publicly, and I'll say it again. I'm just going to guess people aren't going to pay $5,000 for laptops en masse. Well, some people, yes. There's always been $5,000 laptops since I can remember for decades, but it usually makes the news. It's usually like some insane top spec Razer or Apple or some like Titan workstation desktop replacement thing with like 64 gigs of RAM or more. Now that's becoming more normal, but 5-10 years ago, that was insane. Um, I think that there's always a market for people paying that much for laptops, but I don't think it's millions of people are going to be willing to pay that. So I don't know what to say. And when I talk to people at like Micro Center or Newegg, they have more SKUs from like Asus and Gigabyte and MSI in stock with like RTX 4090. It's really a 4080 laptops than ever before for like 5,000. Yes, they always had some $5,000 model, but now they have a ton of them. And what that tells me is they actually are hoping people buy all of these $5,000 laptops. And I just don't think they will. And so all I can say is, you're already seeing some cards go down in price from the next generation lineups. You're seeing the 4090. I had multiple people message me after I put out my recent 4090 sales video saying they just got a 4090 for MSRP at several locations. So it's already pretty much doable to get a 4090 for MSRP, at least in the United States. And all I can hope is people don't buy these new Lovelace laptops. Maybe there will be price cuts on 3080 Ti laptops and stuff, and then there's good back to school sales because I just don't see it. And just to really zero in here on the how small of a performance increase this is going to be in some segments, like if you compare the laptop 4060 to the laptop 3060. It's kind of a similar comparison to the 4080 to the 3090 Ti. Don't get me wrong, I think the 4060 laptop edition most of the time will edge out the 3060. just like how the 256-bit 4080 edges out the 384-bit 3090 Ti. This is now 128 versus 192-bit. I could totally see the 4060 edging that out. But this time the core difference is even bigger than the 4080 to the 3090 Ti. Like the 4080 has 10% less cores than the 3090 Ti. Now we're talking about 20% less cores. And then the 4080 was only like 20% better than the 3090 Ti. So from where I'm sitting, I think the 4060 laptop edition will generally be like 10 to 20% faster. And I wouldn't be surprised if at really high TDPs, it's like the same performance as a 3060 laptop. Now, I think at 35 watts, for sure, you're going to see the 4060 laptop beat the 3060 by maybe 20%. But I think in most laptops, this is going to be no more of a performance increase than 2060 to 3060, which is just pathetic with how much better Lovelace is over Ampere. But it is what it is. And Nvidia will keep doing this if people buy these. But I'm really hoping they don't, because it's just appalling stagnation in price performance to a degree that makes Lovelace on desktop look like a a charity. Like, it's just ridiculous. Not to mention the naming too. I mean, they're literally calling the 4080 the 4090. It's like the same specs. They could have just called it the 4080, but whatever. Beating that horse to death there. Let me see. Reminder, please hit the like button. I see almost 600 people are on the live stream. So I'd hope we get to like at least 600 likes by the end of this. So just a reminder there. Oh, another reminder, Daniel Nenny, the founder of semiwiki.com, is the next guest on Broken Silicon. If you join the Patreon now, you can submit questions. We're going to be talking about AMD's earnings, Intel's earnings, Nvidia's upcoming earnings, and what might happen in a recession with the chips market. So, yeah, remember, I just wanted to plug that there because sometimes people miss that we put out the reader mail for the upcoming guest. And Daniel Nenny's a fan favorite of this community. All right, let's get to another subject from this week here. I still don't see any tipped questions, so I assume no one in the live chat has anything. I'm going to talk about this briefly because I actually didn't get any questions about this from the patrons, which again kind of tells you why the server leaks I do get less views than the non-server leaks. But I don't know, just a reminder that I leaked Granite Rapids configuration, design, Emerald Rapids, and I think that there's no way around it this year in server, which is where most of the money is made, guys. It looks really dire for Intel, and they have no misconceptions about this. They know it's bad and they know it's going to get worse. Emerald Rapids is going to bring 64 cores to server. Whoa, 60 to 64. What an increase. AMD, without even going to Zen 5, is going to launch 128 core Bergamo. So Intel knows it's going to be a disaster this year. Most analysts I talk to that I actually have regular discussions with think AMD is going to take a ton of server market share. But the good news is that if Granite Rapids comes out on time, I don't think it's really going to beat Zen 5, but I do think it's going to make up for lost ground. And I think that's good because we are in a situation where, and again, we'll have to see what happens next year. I mean, Intel could drop the ball again. They certainly have a lot. But if Intel does not get Granite Rapids and Sierra Forest out on time in like the first half of next year, I have genuine worry for like the cuts the company will have to make to stay afloat. I'm not saying they'll go out of business. They're not doomed. They won't be doomed for years. IBM never went out of business. I don't think Intel will. But I do think we might see a situation where they become like a competitor with broken legs at a race where, yeah, they're making new stuff. Yeah, they're bringing big performance increases every year, but they're not like, really challenging AMD anymore. And from what I'm hearing, that might not happen next year. I don't know that they're going to beat AMD, but it might be more like an Alder Lake situation where, okay, they're kind of catching up again. And then Diamond Rapids is supposed to be, frankly, what I've seen of Diamond Rapids is it looks incredible. So that's the good and the bad news of what I've leaked about Intel servers this month in January. And I guess the only other thing I would say that I think is flying under the radar a lot is what I've said about Intel Foundries, that it kind of seems like Intel Foundries are vastly overperforming the design side of Intel. I'm not saying this will happen, but you could almost see a situation where, Sapphire Rapids came out like a year and a half late because of how many steppings it needed to fix bugs. You could almost see a situation developing with Intel where like they actually catch up to TSMC in 2025, but they're stuck trying to get Diamond Rapids out while AMD's on Zen 6 and they have excess capacity. And then it'd be hilarious if they still were making graphics cards but made them at TSMC, but then their node was better than TSMC, and then Nvidia made their architecture on Intel foundries. I'm just saying, I think there's a chance this landscape is going to look very, very different. Like in 2025, we'll look back to 2015 and we'll say AMD is a different company, good and bad. Intel's a different company, good and bad. Their foundry is great, their designs are falling short. Nvidia is a different company than we imagine, good or bad. Apple's now in server. Just don't I I don't think any of these companies are going out of business. I just kind of can see how they're changing and they're being forced to change. And I think Intel is not an exception. And anyone that thinks that what Intel can just put their head down and nothing's gonna, everything's fine. Everything's not fine. Everything's not fine. And I think there's good evidence they could almost emerge as a new type of juggernaut in the industry in the next few years. We'll have to see though. So watch that Granite Rapids Sierra Forest leak I put out, guys. That one was a lot of effort, and there's a lot of early stuff in there that's pretty exciting. Um, Let me put that there as a timestamp. All right, and now we're getting to Zen 4 X3D, and I believe we have a couple reader mails here from tipped questions about it, so that's perfect timing. So yeah, before I get to them though, I'll just say my overall thoughts. It's funny. I didn't tweet anything about the Zen 4 X3D, the 7950 X3D, the 7900 X3D, 7800 X3D pricing or release dates in the past week, just because frankly, none of it surprised me. We already know the performance, right? And we already know AMD for sure was going to do at least an 8 core and most likely a 16 core. And I guess I don't remember how long ago it was. I guess they already announced the 12 core actually a couple weeks ago, right? So in terms of pricing, the 7950 X3D is right on the money what I expected. You could see that they were making the 7950X, not X3D, the 50X officially $600. And if they're doing that, it's okay, well, it sounds like they're going to go to 700, the same price basically as the i9 13900KS. That's where the 7950 X3D is going to go. And it's going to offer similar multi-threading to the KS, depending on the app. They trade blows depending on the app. Half the power, maybe a third the power actually is Intel. It's going to, and then in gaming, it's going to just bury it. So I really don't have much to say about it. $700. Anyone who chooses a KS is a silly person. What are you doing? This is going to beat it at basically everything. Well, overall, probably costing you less actually on a better platform, a better performance. The 7900 X3D is an odd one, but if you look at the 7900 X3D 12 core, it doesn't really matter how they do it. I mean, I think it is 6 plus 6 to be honest, but even if it's 8 plus 4, it's clear that they're putting the full amount of V cache on it. So that means that if it is a 6 core with V cache, that 6 core still has the same amount of V cache, not total cache, but V cache that an 8 core would have. And I think it's going to game really well. $600 for me. I don't know why I wouldn't just pay the extra 100 to get a 16 core, but at the end of the day, I guess that allows you to have an excellent level of gaming performance that tops the charts, while also having an extra 4 cores for background tasks and boosting and stuff. So, or 6 cores for background tasks and boosting and stuff. So, yep, I don't really see, who would get what. I mean, I guess the i9 13900KS is about the same price. It'll lose in gaming by 20-30% while having better multi-threading, but it'll use double the energy. I don't know. I think the 7900 X3D is an odd choice. I would either get the 8 core or the 16 core, or if I was just doing workstation stuff, I would get probably the 7900 Non-X for $400 that comes with a cooler. But, it's there for those that want that middle ground, I guess. And that's really that's really my opening thoughts on Zen 4 X3D pricing. The 16 core is exactly what I thought it'd be priced at. The 8 core and the 12 core are $20 to $50 more than I expected. But they're doing that because they know the gaming crown is just undisputed now. So that's why clearly AMD's telegraphing that they don't think there's any competition in gaming for the next year. Once again, just like when they launched Zen 3. All right, W tips. Thank you for the tips question. He says, what is the future of CPUs? AMD now has gaming CPUs, X3D, and general use CPUs. I think most gamers will buy the 8-core X3D just and be fine. Well, to be honest, guys, it is funny when we talk about price performance here because it's like, I think someone with a 7600 is fine, aren't you? For heck, someone with discount Alder Lake is fine. I mean, what's the future of CPUs? Um, I think what you're just gonna see is maybe AMD try to more tactically have the lineup more even than right now. It's a bit of a I wouldn't say it's a mess, but man, is there a lot of weird choices all over the place in the Zen 4 lineup now that X3D is coming out. I would assume with Zen 5 they try to like more coherently divide and segment that. But at the same time, I think there's always going to be a case for a couple gaming focused SKUs in any lineup. And to be completely honest with you guys, I'm surprised Intel didn't do this a decade ago. Intel would have seen all the way going back to like Sandy Bridge, what people are willing to pay, and with Sandy Bridge E, and especially with Skylake, like what people are willing to pay for the best gaming CPU. And they kind of it's just so weird to me when Broadwell came out with that massive amount of cache on package, and it had really, really good latency and really is really responsive. I just find it's almost like an early 5800 X3D. I find it a little odd Intel didn't look into making like, a 4, 5, 6 core CPU that had like 128 megabytes of cache on it just for gaming. Understand why they didn't, it was focused on this, focused on that. But, they launched Broadwell with, I think they called it like, Crystal Well graphics or Iris or something else back then. Iris may be the new thing they call it. Um, and they saw really, really good input from gamers, but Broadwell, of course, didn't clock very high. And it's just odd to me they didn't take the best yields of the Crystal Well quad core Skylakes and say, hey, we're going to do a limited run of the best gaming chip now on desktop. They could have done this the whole time. And so I would expect to answer W's question directly here. Moving forward, Zen 5 will more consistently segment probably from the start, like put more thought into like this is when you start to get Vcache, this level is when you like get this extra accelerator, so on and so forth, to make it kind of a linear progression of more features the more you pay. But I would still expect AMD to have at least one chip midway through the lineup where they like throw in something extra to crush gaming performance. Because if you do that, you just take so much market share, like on desktop, like with the i5 2500K. And there are just some really specific things you can do to boost gaming performance and some non-gaming tasks with that extra cache as well. That I find it hard to believe that AMD won't look at the sales of like the 5800 X3D, for example, and say, wow, people really did buy that and we couldn't keep it in stock for like a year. Maybe we should have been trying to have an extra good gaming CPU in the middle of our lineup the entire time. So that's what I would say. I think you'll see less of a scattershot lineup moving forward, but they'll still have these targeted, excellent gaming chips in the middle because it just makes sense. Unless, of course, Intel is nowhere to be seen in competition, then maybe they won't care because that happened with Pile Driver, where by the time we were at Haswell and before Zen 1 was out with Skylake, Intel was like, well, why would we do anything else? We've got these unlocked like i3s or something that these 2-core 4-thread Skylake i3s beat the best Pile Driver in gaming most of the time. So why would we bother giving you anything special for gaming? That's the only thing I would worry about with AMD is if like they're, I don't know what you would call it, 9600X, even if it doesn't have Vcache, even if it costs extra, still beats everything Intel has in gaming. I don't know why AMD would care. That's the only thing you have to watch out for there. And since I brought up the 5800X, let me get to this Patreon question here since it's on subject. Um, Nicholas Klein writes in and he says, Tom, do you think AMD delayed the 5800 X3D to milk consumers by pushing them to the 5900 or 5950? Or do you think they did it to try and have more stock? Well, I don't know what you mean by delayed. The 5800 X3D, right? That's Zen 3 in your question, Nicholas Klein. That came out later because AMD just didn't have Zen 3 with Vcache yields working at a good level until then. Like AMD would have launched it sooner. They even had some Zen 2 prototypes with Vcache, and Zen 3 was built from the start to accept Vcache in all of its models. It's well, all of its desktop models, and which means server and Threadripper as well. But they didn't really get the packaging reliable until they launched the 5800 X3D basically. So like they didn't delay it to milk anyone. They would have, I mean, for sure, right? I mean, not to mention Zen 3 Alder Lake came out before the 5800 X3D. AMD is not an idiot. Like if they could have had Zen 3 with Vcache out before Alder Lake launched, they would have. Trust me. But they just wasn't ready. Same goes for Zen 4. I don't think they're milking when they're launching things. I think there's always that calculus of launching the most expensive parts first, but there's always going to be another reason to that as well. Okay, let's see here. Um, Let me see. I'll save Kenahoon's question for later. Let me get through the remainder X3D questions here, but keep those tipped questions coming. I'm logging them. Dino999 writes in. He says, "Hello, Tom. Is the staggered launch window of X3D because AMD can't meet the demand? They announced the CPUs would be available in February. Nothing about certain models, and I'm finding it odd. The main SKU, meaning the 7800 X3D, is probably the one most people are excited about. That will sell the most volume is being launched a month later, right? Because that's what I saw. I think late February. Am I wrong? Zen 4 X3D for the 7900 X3D. God, I'm saying 3D so much. And the 7950 X3D. Those are launching, I think, February. And then I believe beginning of March or something, or beginning of April, I think, the 7800 X3D launches. So Dino's question is this, anything having to do with demand, milking? And I would say there's always the chance there's something going on we don't know about. Like, you have to remember, these Zen 4 desktop chips aren't just the chiplets themselves for the cores. They also have an IO die. So for all I know, they have not enough IO dies to only pair one of those with one 8-core. And if they have an excess amount of chiplets to IO dies, well, then it'd make more sense to launch the 12 and 16 core first. Speculating. I'm not saying I know that. I'm just at the same time, though, I think in the mid-range, AMD really doesn't have gaming competition as well. So another reason they would want to launch the 12 and the 16-core Vcache models first is the i9-13900KS and K are where Intel can kind of claim a gaming crown of 2 to 5%. So it makes sense for AMD to go for that now. Make sure they take the top enthusiast gaming chips now. And in the mid-range, what's their competition? The 7700X pretty much beats all of mid-range Raptor Lake, doesn't it? So they have nothing pressing them to launch the 7800 X3D now, but the i9-13900KS presses them to launch the top 16 core first. So that'd be my answer to that. Let's see here. Aluv Vatai writes in from the Patreon. He says, "Hi, Tom. Do you think that the early Zen 4 X3D announcement hurt initial Zen 4 sales? New platform costs are high at launch, and people knew that the best gaming CPUs wouldn't be available for 3 to 4 months. So why buy an expensive platform now when the best stuff is yet to come out?" I think yes and no. I think AMD overestimated how much people would be willing to pay the same price for AM5 that they paid for X570 when that launched, right? I think that's for sure true. I think that's a bigger factor than X3D. But the retailers I talked to, they do all say that they would like people coming in, especially like a Micro Center, they would say, "Oh, I'm waiting for Zen 4 X3D." So there's no doubt about it that that was a big factor. Having said that, though, didn't we all know it was coming anyways? Like, we knew, right? Like, I leaked it. Zen 3 had Vcache. What are they not going to do a Vcache lineup for Zen 4? Um, I would say announcing it early could have hurt sales, but I think we all knew it was coming anyways. We all knew. We all knew it was. AMD didn't need to announce it, so I don't know. My answer would just be I think AMD overestimated the demand for a new platform that doesn't have connections to the previous one. Like even when Zen 3 came out, even though my X570 motherboard was like $400, it came with a sound card, granted, but it wasn't cheap, guys. And B550 launched for like $300, $200. Like, these were not cheap platforms. You need to get them. You could have put Zen 3 into the X470, which is $100. And this time you just had to get it. So I don't even think it's just the DDR5. I think it's that the fact that you actually had to get the new platforms, and DDR5 is expensive, and frankly, all CPUs out were more than good enough. Can we be honest? Whereas Zen 3 kind of crushed 144 hertz gaming for once and for good. I think those are the bigger factors there. And I think people were always going to be waiting for X3D no matter what. And you could make the argument AMD should have waited to launch Zen 4 for when X3D was ready, but they beat Raptor Lake to market. That couldn't have hurt them, guys. So I don't know. Frobos writes and he says, where are cooling solutions going when AMD is recommending? Yeah, let me put down a timestamp here. I've been talking for a while. All in one energy. Okay. Frobos writes in and says, where are cooling solutions going when AMD is recommending a 280 millimeter all-in-one water cooler for their 7000 X3D parts, and Intel is even worse off with their high-end chips basically requiring you to do a custom loop? If this keeps escalating like GPU heatsink sizes, where will we be in 3 to 5 years? What tech is necessary? Would they literally make a mini air conditioner for PCs? Well, it's probably coming at some point. Will I have to attach my PC to a home HVAC system to direct vent the heat outside or pull cold air in from somewhere? How will we cool high-end rigs in a few years? Can 360 all-in-one liquid coolers keep up? My answer is yes. And if you look at I think there's just different levers you pull, right? There's the node lever, and then if you have competition, you do the die size lever, and then if you have competition, you do the power consumption lever. And all the levers have now been pulled. So this was always going to happen eventually. And I think AMD saw Zen 4 as a bridge architecture. From what I've seen roadmaps where Zen 4 could work on AM4 if they wanted it to. I would wonder if it even shares the same IO die with Zen 3 if it needed to. Like, AMD built Zen 4. It's like the exact same chiplet size as Zen 2. That can't be a coincidence. They had something where if something went wrong, they could launch it on AM4. If something went wrong in another direction, they could keep selling Zen 3, probably on AM5 if they wanted to make a Zen 3 for AM5 chip. I think they probably could, I would guess. Um, and it wasn't trying to do too much, and they got it out on time. And it brought, like a 30 to 50% performance boost. That's nothing to sneeze at. And I think they thought, eventually we got to fix this clock speed scaling thing. AMD's always had this issue scaling IPC past. At first, it was like 4.5 gigahertz with Zen 2, and then it was like 5 gigahertz with Zen 3. And I think they knew that, like, in the future, they need to get this done now. Like, Intel's always going to be pushing power consumption and clock speed if they need to. So you might as well make Zen 4 the one that pushes clock speed and solves that IPC at high clock speed scaling issue, because that's easier to do than a crazy new architecture, and it buys you time to then launch Zen 5. So I think AMD going with this architecture that uses more energy like Intel, it was just time. It was the right generation to do it. And I think when you look at the fact that the i9 13900KS, as far as we can tell, basically uses the same energy as a K, it just requires less voltage to hit higher clock speeds. You can kind of see they've already maxed out, haven't they? Like, it's it. Like, we found it. Like, chips that are 200 to 300 millimeters squared, if they use more than 300 watts, they throttle too much. And I think we've just found the extent of that. There will always be slightly better and slightly better. There will be increasing innovation in liquid coolers, but where are things going to go? There will be new crazy experiments for sure, but where are things going to go? Better architectures, and I think they will all try to scale to 200 watts or more because they can, and that was just going to happen eventually if there was competition. I think that's what's going to happen. And I think with GPUs, especially when you look at the Titan cooler I leaked, like, you see Nvidia playing around with, like, I don't know, 600 to like 700, 800 watt cooling designs. Maybe not necessarily because they actually want to launch an 800 or 700 watt card now, but because Nvidia knows they might need to eventually. And if that happens, and will people ask, well, what's next? 1200 watt cards? My answer would be probably no. Nvidia just wanted to find out what the limit was in case they needed to hit that limit with Blackwell. And I think that's what AMD did here. We'll see. But I just find it hard to believe there's going to be, like, could there be 500 watt Threadrippers? Sure. but those are bigger chips. Will there be 500-watt, you know, desktop chips? I don't think so. Not if they're this big. They'll just that you can't cool that in that die size, especially with the heat density we're going to see with 3 nanometer. So that'd be my answer to that one. All right, let me get to some of these reader mail questions here. Kennahoon writes in, thank you for the tip. And he says, hey, Tom, I switched from AMD to Nvidia for 3D modeling, and the difference between them in pro driver software is shocking. When will AMD catch up? Let me just write down a timestamp here. Well, I swear every single live stream, I basically get a question like this, like, when is AMD gonna catch up to NVIDIA's just professional suite, drivers, performance, reliability, and everyone I ask says they're better every generation. And if you look right now, I think I saw a benchmark in like DaVinci Resolve or something where the 7900 XTX actually, it was one of the rendering benchmarks. So don't get mad at me if I misremember, but it was like as good as a 4090 and reliable. So they're getting there. That's because RDNA 3 actually boosts higher in non gaming tasks right now for whatever reason. And you can see how they're already catching up. Are they as good though? Well, no, they're not. But every generation AMD seems to get closer, but they're not there until they're there. And in terms of like when will they catch up? I don't know. RDNA 3 was supposed to make up a lot of ground in that. Um I just wouldn't want to throw a dart at it because Nvidia is not sitting still and they know they've got a good thing going here. And I don't see them. I think it all comes down to chiplets. When AMD is using more than a handful of chiplets, when they get something crazy and beat Nvidia in performance at the same time they nail their drivers at launch, that's going to be when they've caught up. But it's probably going to take one of those generations, like probably RDNA 4, and then the one after that. You need 2 good gens in a row of proving you're the best before people take you seriously if your competition's been perceived as the best for a long time. So, I can't promise you when this will happen, but, what I will say is I would guess RDNA 5 is the one to look for because NVIDIA sure as heck isn't rested on their laurels. It's funny, I see someone here in the comments says, "Tom, it's" I don't know why he says bergamot. I didn't say bergamot. I said bergamo. I just said bergamo how Lisa Sue does. So get mad at Lisa Sue for saying it that way, guys. That was one of the funniest things I've ever seen with the bergamo leaks, where like everyone was telling me which Italian accent to use to say it, and then Lisa Sue just comes out and says it a different way, and all of a sudden the comments just went away. There's different ways to pronounce all these words, guys. I mean, even in one country, there's different dialects, and half of the time AMD just says it like in an American dialect. So, you know, let's argue about more interesting things. How about that? Let's see here. All right. Haith Dunn writes in and says, what is your opinion or thoughts about releasing the 70? I already answered this, but I'll get through your questions since you tipped. The 7800 X3D later than the 7900 and 7950 variants. I feel like the 7800 X3D is going to be as good or better at gaming, and AMD knows it. Just to answer that question again, the reason I would say the 7800 X3D predominantly is coming out later is because the 7700X already kills the i5 at gaming, already matches the i7 at gaming, and the 7700X, well, what? It's $300 on Newegg. So, what's AMD's mid-range gaming competition right now? Zero. They don't have any. For $300, you can go get a 7700X. And if you want to do gaming, that's the best choice. However, technically right now, Intel can claim the gaming crown with the i9-13900KS. So they're launching the flagship parts first, so Intel can't say that anymore. So it's really that simple. They just have no priority there. Um, Carbon Cry writes in and says, when will you bring in an Intel engineer to comment on how awesome the vibes are over at Intel? Is there some earnings call where they said they were vibing recently? I don't know. From what I've heard, the vibes aren't actually that great at Intel right now. The vibes are definitely better than when like people like Murthy were there and the company felt like it was going nowhere and needed a new CEO. But I don't really get the feeling that Intel's a low stress environment right now. So there's my comment right away. Um, let me see here. So let me start going through. Yeah. Let me start going through some more GPU focused questions because I see some tipped questions here. and I want to get through those and some of the Patreon ones. And again, guys, click the links in the description for Micro Center. Even just clicking on those links helps me a lot. Hit the like button. I see 1,000 people are watching right now, which is awesome. Hit the like button. Get 1,000, likes up on here to help out the channel, please. All right, let me put down 39.50 for this tips question here. Let's get through these Titan and 4090 Ti questions. So Tiago Costa writes in, hope I said that right. If I didn't, I apologize. And he asks, any idea on when the 4090 Ti might come out or if they are going to come out at all? I'm thinking of buying a 4090 right now, but I'm unsure if I should wait or not. Well, just don't, first of all, just don't overpay for the 4090. I got it for, I got it from a retailer for MSRP. It was kind of a deal, but I got it for MSRP. It's a little complicated there. But when the 4090 actually first launched, though, I had 4090s at MSRP in my cart for hours. I had a ton of 4090s at launch. And yeah, over December, the 4090 price went to about $2,200, I would estimate on average. But it's Christmas shopping. Christmas always raises prices, guys. It's like we've forgotten that once we get out of shortages, there will still be some fluctuations based on the holidays. And now, like let me look right now. Let me pull up Newegg. Let's see. RTX 4090. Oh. And let's see, there's one for 1,700, 1,700. This is like earlier today. I think I saw one there for MSRP. I know a lot of people have gotten them from Best Buy for MSRP recently. So yeah, they're close to MSRP. And I just, I wouldn't overpay. And if you don't overpay, then I don't think the 4090 Ti is going to be cheaper than this. I think Nvidia may hesitate to charge too much, but if it's a 4090 Ti, it's probably going to be 2 grand or 2,500. And if it's a Titan, well, if it's that Titan cooler I leaked, that cooler looks insane. It's 4 slots. It's crazy. It's not going to be cheap. And I think they're going to give it 48 gigabytes of RAM if it's a Titan. They kind of have to. So yeah, I think you'd be looking at a card that's $3,000 to $4,000. So if you want to wait for a Titan, you're waiting to spend twice as much as a 4090. Now, to be fair, I think if they gave it even way faster memory, which is out there right now, and they pushed, another 10% CUDA cores or 20, like whatever is left, I think they could give it another 20% performance potentially, but it will then be like a 500 plus watt card at least for that 20% more performance. And it's going to cost probably 30 to 50% more or something. So, when might it come out? It just depends. I, I, I do wonder if Nvidia wants to wait like a month just to see how the dust settles on sales. But after that, I think they're going to try to establish if RDNA 3 is getting a big driver update that fixes performance, adds that fabled 10 to 20% it's supposed to have more, gets AMD the performance they said it would have. If there's a 7950X, or what would it be called? Like a 7950 XTX coming with double the V cache and more power consumption that could push performance again. If I were Nvidia, I'd want to be sure of what AMD is able to do and what they're doing, because you don't want to launch a Titan and then lose the performance crown or even have it disputed. And you don't want to launch a 4090 Ti and price it somewhere that you think AMD could trounce, especially when Nvidia looks around and they see the 7900 XTX is actually selling incredibly well. They've got to be sitting there and going, are we sure if the 4090 is drifting towards MSRP, we actually want to launch like a $3,000 card now? Will that look a little goofy? I'd give it a month or two, but after that, if Nvidia thinks they can keep the crown, I wouldn't surprise me if they did a limited edition run of the Titan, even just to try out this new cooler design and like beta test it basically for Blackwell in the summer. Like I could see them doing it. I would just suspect they're making the final decision on that over the next month. So I don't think Nvidia is going to announce a Titan tomorrow. It'd be hilarious if I was wrong about that, but and if it comes out 4090 Ti or Titan, you're going to be paying more. So if you can get a 4090 for MSRP and you actually need that level of performance for work or something, I wouldn't wait. That was a very long-winded answer, but I think I had a lot to say about it. So, let's see here. Mex Zaibatsu writes in and says, who would you rather be at Intel, Pat Gelsinger cleaning up his predecessor's mess, or Raja Kadori hoping that Battle Mage is great and on time? Pat Gelsinger, what are you, nuts? I mean, I'll use this as a chance to start talking about Arc here. Let's switch over to Intel again. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, that's the easiest question to answer on earth. You know, I have to be careful what I say here because, like, I'm talking to a lot of people at Intel lately. You can see that in my leaks, I would hope. And like, the, here's what I'll say: there's a reason they killed AXG. Besides the fact that they may not even be able to afford supporting Arc much longer. There's a reason they absorbed AXG into client and data center. There's a reason they divided up the group into other groups that are functioning well. This way, the ARC team can't lie to them anymore because the Intel upper management really does feel like Raj Kadori lied to the rest of the company. Like, I'm just saying it, they did. And anyone who disputes that, and like for some reason shares Raja Kadori's nervous remarks on Twitter, like it proves me wrong right before AXG's canceled. Then of course, those people never apologized for attacking me for that. Like Intel thinks Raja lied to them. They demoted him. This isn't up for debate anymore. AXG's dead. Raja's been demoted. And they've put AXG into other groups. So those other groups have to report to other people, and there's no more lying allowed. And I'm trying to think of how to say this without giving too much away, but like, let's put it this way. Intel's not done cleaning house and figuring out what went wrong with Arc. Let's leave it at that. Like, you don't want to be Roger Kadori right now. I'd much rather be Pat Gelsinger for sure. It's not even close. Enigma writes in and says, after the pay cut, do they lose faith in Pat? Um, you know, no one I talk to right now has lost faith in Pat Gelsinger. I'll just leave it at that. Like, if there's any faith losing at Intel right now, and there is some, it's more so in the company, in a lot of middle management and upper management itself, it seems. I don't hear anyone saying Pat's the problem. No one. No, literally no one I've talked to at Intel says that. If anything, they think if Pat can't save us, no one can. That's basically what the vibe I get by talking to people. And not just in one area, like all over Intel. No one is blaming Pat. They just think Pat has quite the work cut out for him. But none of them are happy about the pay cuts. It's something to a man and woman has been brought up. They're really very unhappy about that and the layoffs, and it is what it is. But none of them say, well, Pat's ruining this. They're like, Pat's clearly just trying to keep this company afloat, is what I hear now. Will their sentiment change in like 6 months? I don't know. Maybe. Okay, let me get to these other art questions. King Harkaneon writes in and says, assuming that ARC grows its drivers enough to become generally viable, at what percentage of the current underpricing would they become financially sustainable? If ARC had to raise prices by 30 or 40%, I fear they just wouldn't sell. Well, they're not selling now. And all the considerable work Intel has put in may end up essentially wasted. Well, that's definitely a fear I have. And so all I can say is I know they've axed like most of the upcoming ARC products on their roadmap, whether they admit it or not, by the way. Um, and I just hope they keep at least a tile from Battle Mage, something small, so that they don't lose the driver work they're doing. Because I did test ARC over the past 2 days. I should have a video coming out about it in a week. I've actually had ARC since I think around launch. I mostly got it for collectors purposes, but I just never was rushed to actually test it. Now that I've seen these big announcement of driver updates, it's like, well, let's finally get to testing it, especially on a note, especially because this will probably be a slow news week. And it's definitely smoother than before, but guys, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, at least in my early testing, I still need to check overclocking and stuff and check out a few other games. But the average I have right now for the A770 is it's basically an RX 6700. Now, I want you to put that in perspective. The A770 is the same cost as the RX 6700. The RX 6700 is more reliable. The RX 6700 uses like half the energy, or so. Well, overclock to overclock, probably it does. So, like, you're talking about paying the same price for a less reliable card that uses more energy. Is that really something to write home about? So if you ask me what they need to do with pricing, if they raise prices at all, it's a complete no. Like, and it's still a gamble. AXG is dead. You don't know if you buy this A770 if in a year your driver support's gone. I would doubt it's gone, but I don't know. There's bits has been shared out there that like there's been more Intel and Nvidia and AMD driver updates for graphics since ARC came out than ARC's released. So I don't know. I'm still not seeing the evidence that this thing is like worth the same price. And Intel knows that. That's why they dropped the price on the A750 because the A750 is, I mean, basically a 6600 and it still costs more than a 6600, still uses more energy than a 6600, still can't boot some games. You want to play Halo, you're shit out of luck. So if you ask me, the A750 should be 200, the A770 should be 300, and it's still a gamble. So I don't think they can afford to raise prices at all and have these sell because they're not selling now. But that's my question there, or answer there. Joachim Hagen writes in and says, early in your ARC leaks, you had some rumors of designs that had 1 to 4 tiles. For the 4 tile design, you said it used a lot of energy. So yeah, I mean, I think this was like late 2019, early 2020, probably. I don't know. It was 2020, I think. Yeah, I leaked that I had talked to someone at Intel about these like closed door tests that they even showed off to some partners. And remember, this was before Ampere and RDNA 2 are out. So they were showing off I think it was actually, I don't know how many tiles were in this model. I know it went up to like 8 tiles. It was between 4 and 8 tiles, I believe. And this 4 to 8 tile Alchemist prototype was beating the 2080 Ti and running games at 4K 60. The problem was it used 1,000 watts. So they just eventually scrapped that, went to a monolithic design. And in fact, if you guys go listen to the last episode of Broken Silicon that John Petty was on, from John Petty Research, he confirmed that. He said what I had leaked in the year before. He had heard the same things about a powerful card that used 1,000 watts and multiple tiles. And so this is, in my book, completely confirmed. Not just me. John Petty confirms this leak. Um, he said, after seeing how much power the 3090 Ti and 4090 use, Joachim Hagen's asking this, was it a mistake that Intel made it a 250-watt card? Or was this the best performance they could make? I think, yep. So here's the thing. The A770 probably costs, I'd say $250 to make the 16 gigabyte, at 250, maybe $300 to produce. So they're making razor thin margins after shipping on this thing. And that's that. So what do you think a 4 tile version of this would look like? I mean, maybe it would be 2, 3 times stronger, but it might cost Intel like $600 to produce. And then what does it compete with? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it would have, I guess, it launched the same day as the 4090. I mean, it probably would have competed with like a 4060, 4070 while using double the energy. I mean, remember, Alchemist actually finally launched in 2022. So, no, I don't think it would have been the right move to launch a card that uses like 450 watts and is half the performance of a 4090 or something. Instead, they launched something that's, 200-ish watts and is a fourth the performance of a 4090 or whatever it is. And I think that was the right move. Not to mention, if they were having problems with power consumption at that level with that many tiles, like you don't know if there were other bugs as well they could have run into, and they barely got Alchemist out the door. So no, I think they made the right decision. And from what I've heard, Battle Mage's tile versions are basically scrap too. So it seems like they still don't quite have that working effectively, at least not for like multi big dies for graphics. So that's the Intel questions there. Let me get through some more of these tipped questions. Let's see. Don't want to miss any. Nope, there's one. There's one. Got a lot of questions here, actually. Yeah, okay. So the next tipped question comes from Greyhawk Garage. He says, any rumors about more than 2 threads per core outside of IBM's power? So where should we work this into for questions? Yeah, I guess we'll just do this here. 4-way SMT. And let's put down the timestamp. So yeah, Greyhawk Garage asks, any rumors about more than 2 threads per core outside of IBM's power? Are there markets outside of data center multi-socket machines where that might be a killer feature? Your answer is it's very easy for me to answer this. Greyhawk, the answer to everything you just asked is yes. That's pretty much all I can say. It's not one company working on it, it's multiple companies working on it. I mean, already leaked that Zen 3 had a four-way hyperthreading design that they canceled. Adored TV leaked that too. Unfortunately, that wasn't in Zen 3. So that's the tricky thing about leaking. Sometimes it can be an old roadmap that they've already canceled. That's what happened in the case of that. But AMD has never abandoned this four-way SMT design. Neither, and Intel is working on it too. And like, I'm pretty sure like everyone's working on four-way hyperthreading. It's just a matter of when they think they got it working perfectly, because you know, the stronger the cores you get, the more die space they take out, the more there's some people probably get mad at me for describing it this way, but this is at least how I think about it. The more resources that are in these bloated, huge cores, the more you can probably benefit from having more threads queuing up tasks in a core. And it's just a matter of like when it's the right time to do it and when you're sure you have your software down so it doesn't hold back performance. And to this day, depending on who I talk to, it's funny to hear one source at Intel say, we should never do this, it'll be inefficient. See another source at Intel say, I think four-way hyperthreading's got to come sooner rather than later. And I think it just depends which part of the company they work in and which tasks they typically are programming for. But everyone's working on it. And I think if they got it working perfectly, it could certainly be useful outside a data center. But it's, as far as I wouldn't bet on it being here for like another 2 years though, but there's always that chance they get it into something sooner rather than later. Snow writes in and he says, will Nvidia refresh Lovelace with DisplayPort 2.1, maybe with the new Titan, or is that infeasible with display? Yeah, not HDMI DisplayPort. Yeah, or is that infeasible? I really want that 7680 times 2160 monitor, but I'm locked into CUDA. I'm trying to think. I think I've talked to some people and they said it was theoretical that Nvidia could do some adjustments and have like a partial DisplayPort 2.1 support, which technically RDNA 3 is partial as well. But a lot of people don't expect Nvidia to get to the same bandwidth through DisplayPort that AMD has with RDNA 3 right now. But maybe they could get it halfway to where AMD is or something. So will they? I don't know. It's possible, but no one's told me it's coming yet. And any other speculation, I feel like would just be me talking out of my depth, and I don't want to do that. But I'll write that down for the timestamp there. Thank you for the tip, Snow. Let me see. Let me see. AMD. Yeah, all right. So let's do this here. The Drollet writes in and says, isn't Zen 5 supposed to be increasing single-threaded performance and cores per tier? Would Vcache models be the next 2700K? 2700K. So you mean the i7 2700K? I assume that's what you're talking about. I mean, yeah, Zen 5 is going to increase single-threaded performance. Of course, they always do. And the amount of cores per tier. I think yeah, I think so. I obviously you never know for sure. Like you look at what Nvidia's doing with Lovelace, and they're practically not increasing performance per tier. They're just adding new tiers. So you never know if AMD tries to do that with some of the tiers. But when I see the massive core count increase we're getting out of Zen 5, which is at least a doubling in cores over Zen 4, depending on the segment. Yeah, I think so. I think you're gonna see, I would expect I would expect, I think so. I would expect 8 cores to become the lower end and 12 cores to become the new mid-range, and then 24 cores to be like the new high end. I would at least expect that out of Zen 4 on desktop. Yeah. I mean Zen 5 on desktop, yeah. Um Enigma says it seems that Turin has 256 cores versus Diamond Rapids 144 cores. How is Diamond Rapids supposed to reach parity with that? Is it IPC accelerators? Well, I mean, I don't know that Turin actually will have 256 cores. They'll have at least 192 cores. So let's just say that for now. I feel like I've said this for the last 3 live streams. I'm behind on following Zen 5 because I'm just so razor focused on like the Intel servers now and Zen 4 X3D and all that stuff now. So I'm starting to put out feelers for Zen 5. So yeah, you can expect a Zen 5 update from me soon, but from what I've seen, it's at least 192 cores for Turin, and Diamond Rapids I don't actually remember off the top of my head the core counts, but I don't know that it's 144 cores. I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than that actually. without checking my notes. And I mean, what type of hyperthreading did people just ask me about when you asked the question, how are they going to reach parity? What do you think Diamond Rapids is working towards, guys? I've basically been dancing around it. As for IPC, yeah, I've talked about the massive IPCs coming from Jim Keller's Royal Core project for Arrow Lake, Panther Lake, and Lunar Lake. So, yeah, Diamond Rapids is supposed to have a massive IPC increase as well. And we're just going to leave it at that. In terms of how is Diamond Rapids going to compete with Turin? Is it by adding more threads, IPC, and accelerators? Again, like my other answer, the answer to all of those questions, Enigma, is yes, all of those. So we'll leave it at that. Colt Marshmallow writes in and says, "Hi Tom, any nefarious thoughts on the Witcher 3 graphics update recently? I don't personally understand updating a game to be more demanding to run, apart from forcing users to buy new GPUs." I mean, I really haven't followed that. I'm honestly not a big Witcher fan, so this is something that update performance. Let me see. Oh, wow. Yeah, it looks like they're getting a lot of hits here for stuttering, frame rate drops. I mean, guys, it's CD Projekt. When do they make a game that works? I don't know. No offense, guys. I mean, I guess some people will see that as a hot take, but Cyberpunk wasn't exactly a good launch. I mean, this is one of those companies where it's like, oh, they have performance issues in an update. I'd almost be more surprised if CD Projekt Red didn't. So we'll just leave it at that. That is my honest to God opinion. I'm just gonna be honest. That's my answer. But thank you for the tip. Let me see. Ron Jakar Patel says a very weird and cryptic thing thanking me. And I'm just going to leave it at that, as it is a very odd question. But thank you for the tip, Ron Jakar Patel. So I think we're just going to leave it at that. Let me see here. The billionaire writes in and says, "Do you know how many cores Zen 5 SKUs will have?" Well, the exact SKUs, no, because and even and I can't know. Like I can't possibly know how AMD is going to exactly segment things. They won't make that final decision either, guys, for like I'd say at least another 6 months. I think Zen 5 it's like first half 2024, I believe, unless it gets pushed back again. Uh like they need the design to be 100% finalized, ramping production, and even then they might not make the decisions on pricing and segmentation yet because it's all arbitrary to a certain extent. It's like, where is Intel competing? Can we afford to charge this much for a 12 core? Oh, we can't. Intel's too competitive. So, you know, I per SKU, do I know what they'll price and segment Zen 5 at? No, I don't. Let's see. Enigma writes in, any idea which client Intel sign up for Intel 3? Which client Intel sign up for Intel 3? Well, so all I can say is Intel 3 is going to be used by Granite Rapids with Cove, Redwood Plus Cove. Sorry, am I getting tired here after going for an hour? And I believe that was also what else? I think Arrow Lake's actually 20A if I remember correctly. Like I don't remember my leak off the top of my head. So Granite Rapids is the first Intel 3 product, I believe. So let's leave it at that. Jason Wilson writes in and says, "My local computer center where I live, I noticed a lot of AM5 builds. The tech said they haven't seen this many so far. They said between the cheaper DDR5, 4. NVMe 4.0 prices also helping. What are your thoughts?" Um, let's start moving into sales. AMD, Nvidia, Intel, because I do have some Patreon questions about this right now. Okay, let's put down timestamp 03.42. Okay. Let's see here. So, in terms of sales, like I don't know what to say to you guys. There are some people that have disputed what I've said about like Zen 4 versus Raptor Lake sales, but you guys got to remember my last video updating sales was talking about January. It was not talking about quarter 4. And in January, AMD has cemented their prices, Intel has raised prices, and DDR5 is getting cheap, and so is AM5. And I all I can say, Jason, is yeah, when I talk to retailers, Zen 4 is starting to fly off the shelves. In fact, let me go and see if that's true this exact hour right now. It's on CPU bestsellers because it does fluctuate a bit, which is interesting. But yeah, so if I go to CPU bestsellers right now, all Zen 3 at the top, of course, but let's also look at new releases. Yeah, it's slowly catching up to Raptor Lake in sales this quarter. And this is just on Amazon, right? You have to remember, AMD sells their CPUs at AMD.com directly. Intel doesn't. So anytime AMD's processors are more expensive on Amazon or Newegg, people go to AMD.com or Micro Center. Intel is not doing like really that many discounts at Micro Center for Raptor Lake either. So again, if you're in the United States and you're building something, number one, you're going to go to Micro Center. Number two, you're going to go to AMD.com if Amazon prices go up. You can't do that with Raptor Lake. So the fact that AMD is in the top, what is this, top six, is half of the top six SKUs, that means that they're probably selling as well as Raptor Lake this month, guys, or better. So nothing, everyone's saying Zen 4 is flying off the shelves this month to me, and I'm not surprised to hear someone else say the same thing. All right, so that's that update there. Let me get to let me see. Let me just call this section actually AMD's earnings because I did have some thoughts here. This was one of the main subjects, AMD's quarter four earnings. I've seen some hot takes, but I think generally speaking, those earnings also backed up what I've said in my past videos over the past few weeks, which is that whether you like it or not, AMD is outselling Intel now. Zen 3 is the top seller, then Alder Lake, then Zen 4, then Raptor Lake, then Zen 4, and now Zen 4 is catching up to Raptor Lake. And all of these things AMD is selling next to Intel, they have better margins. AMD's earnings weren't bad. I mean, they missed earnings by a little bit, but they were far and above average compared to every other company. And yeah, I mean, AMD isn't doing excellent. This is a recession we're in now, but they are doing better than most of their peers. They're not laying off people en masse, and I think it's pretty obvious that AMD is being a little conservative right now, but they're doing so they don't go bankrupt. They're a smaller company, a more nimble company. Some would say they're too risk adverse, but when you look at AMD's earnings compared to Intel's, you go, they're probably making the right decisions." So that's really all I have to say about AMD's earnings. I think some people, for some reason, expected AMD to have horrible earnings next to Intel, and they just didn't. I guess the only other thing I would say is I've never seen more clickbaity headlines about RDNA 3 shipments. Like, I mean, AMD's RDNA 3 cards have been in the top GPU sellers frequently throughout the past few weeks. That never happened against their previous stuff. What we've seen out of RDNA 3 shipments over the past 2 quarters is AMD overshipped RDNA 2, reduced shipments because they thought demand would be low. Demand was a little higher than they expected for the 7900 XTX. In fact, that's just something I hear in general, which I do find funny. AMD really did think the 7900 XT for $900 would be a big seller. I don't know why they thought that. I wish anyone like me could have been there and said, "I don't know what you're smoking. There's no way." But at the end of the day, they overproduced the 7900 XT and they underproduced the XTX. And they said that they know that and they're going to be increasing shipments throughout the quarter. But you guys also got to remember this. Anytime AMD makes a change in shipments, you're not going to really see the effects for, I mean, really 4 to 12 weeks. If they're doing air shipping, which they're going to want to avoid that since we're not in the holiday season now, that's still like 2 week lag time at least. And then boat shipping 6 to 12 weeks. So when you see them say they have light shipments in quarter one, well, it's like, no shit. It takes 6 weeks to get anywhere. So if they were adjusting their shipments last quarter, you're not going to see the effects of that really until quarter two, anyways. So I don't know. I just saw a lot of ridiculous takes about some of their statements they made and their earnings. And the fact of the matter is, they're increasing shipments, but you don't see the effects of that for 6 weeks, anyways. And that's all that's going on. AMD wants to take market share, guys. It's obvious. If they didn't, the 7900 XTX would be 1200 and the 7900 XT would be 1000. Granted, I think they overestimated how people would perceive their 20 gigabyte card, but they didn't have to charge what they charged for these cards, but they are because they do want market share. I do think they need to drop the price on the 7900 XT, though. I really don't know why they thought that'd be a good price for it, but whatever. CRCV writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. In the AMD quarter four results, it seemed like the client side almost lost half of its revenue compared to last year, even enduring a loss around 150 million. Meanwhile, Intel client side of the business only lost a third of its revenue and kept being positive. Do you think AMD will focus more on the client side moving forward? Client side, laptop, desktop, us, not server guys. As I understand it, there is ample capacity at TSMC, so AMD could produce more, or is there another bottleneck down the line which prevents a rise in sales? Motherboards, chipsets. Well, I think so. Yeah. First of all, the money is made in server, right? And AMD's taking server market share. That's where you make most of the money. So, without a doubt, they should be focusing on that first. Second of all, like if you're selling an Epic chip for like $10,000 and you have to pay $100 to ship it via a jet, like to express ship it. Who cares? You're paying $100 to ship a $10,000 product. No one cares. You're spending $100 to ship a $200 product. That's a problem. And Zen 4 launched in the holiday season. It just makes sense to focus supply on the stuff that pays better to ship it faster and just pays better in general. So now that we're out of the holiday season, yeah, I expect AMD to focus on client much more. To be honest, though, I don't really expect like a lot of the laptop stuff to hit till like late quarter two, anyways, though. And that's just how it is. Um, and I think, yeah, I think they focused on the right things if you look at their earnings, but I do think they do need to start being more aggressive in client because they have a real opening here. Especially if they keep the prices where they're at, keep doing special sales like they've been doing, and then have a ton of supply. I think they could massively outsell the competition in client. And that's really all I got to say. But I think they did what they did last quarter for a reason. Chris Rich writes in and says, considering Zen 4's latest pricing, including the X3D models, are we now in a full-on price war? Does Intel have anything left in the tank? I don't know. I saw some rumors they may drop some prices again, but I don't think they have much left in the tank. No. I think they can afford to sell the i9s for less for sure, especially the i9 3900K. I don't think I've actually heard some, I can't say the numbers because I was told not to, but I mean, I'm talking like tens of thousands of 3900 KSs, not hundreds of thousands. So they can't even make a lot of those. They probably won't drop the price on that much. 13900K, I think they're making a lot of them and they could probably afford to sell that for 550. But you have to remember the i7, the i5, these all use the same die as the i9 13900K. So their material costs are pretty close. And I don't really think they can afford to sell the Raptor Lake i5 for $200. I don't really think they can afford to sell that i7 for 300. So I don't know. I think they have some room for strategic price drops here and there, but I think if they do that, AMD has more room. Again, look at AMD's margins, way better than Intel's. Like if Intel drops prices more, AMD can too. So I think Intel is going to be very careful about how aggressive they get in a price war because they're already kind of in a corner. Um, Pam King Harkinian writes in and says the general recession will hit tech hard. Less room for long-term plans and more core stuff and survival. How do you think that Intel, AMD, and Nvidia are set in this upcoming poor market? AMD has obviously aimed for cost efficiency more than the others, but their size is also considerably smaller. Well, uh, I think anytime you're a more nimble company and you're thinking smartly, obviously you have a better ability to respond in a recession. Less nimble companies have more inventory and are like steering an aircraft carrier and they get hit by recessions usually harder. If anything, just because they hold more of the market share, so they have more to lose. So AMD has a natural advantage pretty much in this market, in a recession right now, especially now that they're acting smartly. They weren't always that way. Um, but I think Intel is the most exposed. I think Nvidia the second most, and I think AMD, if they play their cards right, they might miss some opportunities to take market share if they're not more aggressive, but they would also easily avoid losing a ton of money. The biggest thing with Nvidia, though, because I've kind of danced around talking about Nvidia here, is I think some of their products really are like I've seen some people in the comments say things like, you know, "Oh, the RTX 4090 should be $700." Guys, the RTX 4090 probably costs at least $700 for its bill of materials. So, I mean, you add up the RAM, 24 gigabytes, you add up the board cost. We already know what the board costs were, and this is verified by Gamers Nexus. It's verified by MyLeaks. It's verified by EVGA saying that selling the 3080 for $600 they'd start losing money. Well, so what do you think happens when you have the same die size, but now it's on 4 nanometer instead of 8 nanometer? When the RAM's faster and more expensive, when the coolers are more expensive than Ampere. I mean, if it was $600 for a 3080, 24 gigabyte 4090, I don't know. I think the cost to make one of those is between $700 and $900, guys, which is fine. They're selling it for 1600. So yeah, they're making a killing. They're making it, like a 60 to 100% margin or something on that thing. They're still doing fine. But then that means the 4080 probably costs, 4 to 550 to make. Okay. And then the 4070 Ti costs. Well, you can see how the lower you go down the Lovelace stack, the more AMD has a pricing, a manufacturing cost advantage. And the more they're really exposed in laptop with how they're segmenting their stuff. Nvidia can definitely afford price drops. I think they could afford to sell the 4090 and still have decent margins at like 1300, 1200. And again, so this isn't me defending Nvidia's prices. Listen to me here. I don't think they could afford to sell the 4090 for 800. I think they could definitely afford to sell it for 1300 though, and they're selling it for 1600. So there's some greed there. There is. And I think they could afford to sell the 4080 for 900. I think they could have sold it for afford to sell the 4070 Ti for like, I don't know, 650 or something easily, and the 4070 for like 550. But you gotta wonder what's gonna happen if AMD dropped the price on the 7900 XT, which as far as I'm concerned, isn't any more to make than a 6800 XT, or isn't much more to make than a 6800 XT. And then the 7800 XT using Navi 32 costs less than a 6800 XT to make, I believe. So you'd be looking at a situation where AMD may be able to price the 7800 XT for $600 and not care. Drop the price on the 7900 XT. I'm not really sure how Nvidia responds to that if they do that. So again, recapping King Harkinian's question. Um, Intel's the most exposed and Nvidia is exposed, but they definitely have room to go on pricing. Uh, but Nvidia is also really stubborn, so I do wonder what happens if AMD's extra aggressive in laptop pricing. But it's just too early to say. And we still don't quite know, what's going on with Nvidia's like Ampere supply. And I think I actually had a question about that. So I'm getting into that now too. Dino999 writes in and says, you mentioned previously that Nvidia still had a lot of Ampere stock. Any news on that besides the 60 and 70 cards that are still in stock and still expensive, as far as I can tell? I've only seen restocks on Newegg from unknown brands called like Paladin that seem to be only placing and providing 3080s brand new. Are other AIBs holding up because they still can't get rid of the 4070 Ti and 4080, or have they already gotten rid of their stock? Well, there's probably definitely something to that because I did hear that like AIBs and Nvidia were planning to like seesaw supply between Ampere and Lovelace back and forth. Like they do a big 4090 drop, and then they basically didn't ship more 4090s in December, but then they did a bunch of 3090s and 3090 Ti's next to the 4080. And I think they probably expected the 4080 and 4070 Ti to sell out, and it didn't. And so there's probably something there where they're hoping those sell out before they supply more Ampere. But besides that, I think the best thing I can say is this is going to be easier to answer in 2 months because I've always heard about Nvidia planning to trickle in stock of Ampere instead of dumping it all at once like AMD's done with RDNA 2 because AMD has oversupply but not too much. So if you only have a little oversupply, just drop the price and get rid of it. With Nvidia, they have so much they're just worried if they dropped it all at once, there'd be a race to the bottom in pricing, and then you know they'd lose a ton on their earnings. Nvidia's earnings this quarter are going to be interesting to look at, by the way. Uh, so I'd say this will be easier to answer in 2 months. And I think they have sold more of it than some people would expect. Like Ampere sold gangbusters, I'm told, over the holiday season. But at the same time, we just can't be sure how much is left in warehouses again for another 2 months. So that's my best answer to that question. Let me see here. Carbon Cry writes in and says, given the higher margins retailers make on Ryzen 7000 than on Raptor and Alder Lake, do you know of retailers trying to push people towards Ryzen rather than the Core series? Yes, I do. They absolutely are. You can see it. I mean, I don't think Micro Center is trying to, from the people I've talked to there. They just are. But it's some other retailers that compete with Micro Center because there's some other chains in the US people don't know about that much, and also in Europe. Yeah, they're definitely pushing people towards Ryzen because they're like, we know we'll make $20 on the 7600X. We're going to make $5 on the i5. So let's do the 7600X, guys. So yeah, I think that's definitely going on right now. Let me see. Brett Summers writes in and says, Tom, I got tired of waiting on Navi 32, which I assume will be used for the 7800 XT. So I picked up a 6950 XT. I won't be disappointed with it because realistically, would the 7800 XT even be better performing than a 6950 XT, except for, I don't know, ray tracing? The 6950 XT was a pretty good price. I don't want to be in this endless wait cycle anymore. I think if you needed a new card now, the 6950 XT is solid for 600 or for $700. And actually, let me check. Does it come with some games too? Doesn't it come with games? Let's see. Duh, duh, duh. 6950 XT. Is that still in stock? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it comes with Callisto Protocol and Dead Island too. So, like, especially if you want those games, you're basically getting this thing for $600. You know, I think Navi 32, if they really pushed it, could actually plausibly be only 10-20% behind the 10 to 25% behind the 7900 XT. In fact, it'd be funny if it was just 10% behind because they'd say, "Oh, it's the same difference between the 7800, the 6800 XT and the 6900 XT." And I think it's going to come out for a similar price that to what you got the 6950 XT for a similar performance. Which remember, the 6950 XT is like 20% better than a 6800 XT. So they would say this is the 7800 XT. It's 20% better than the 6800 XT, and maybe they'll even make it $600. They'll be like, it's even better in ray tracing. And so I think when the 7800 XT comes out, it will be probably a better option for the price and longevity than a 6950 XT that's currently priced. But you can wait forever, and that might not be for a few months. And by then, the 6950 XT will probably be 600. But should you have waited, you could have gotten this with those games now. I've been gaming for months. So, no, I don't think you made a mistake. But, how much better will it be? Look, the 7800 XT is probably going to be a 6950 XT exactly, except it'll use like 100 watts less power or 100 watts, maybe less power. It'll have better ray tracing and it'll have a couple, it'll probably win some newer games a little more. But otherwise, it's basically you're waiting to pay, you're basically just waiting for the same performance. Then it wasn't a horrible decision. Jeff Burns writes in and says, Hey, Tom, well, the 7000 series of AMD cards is getting a lot of bug fixes and driver updates, including day zero patches. The 6000 series haven't seen an update of any kind in between 53 to 61 days, depending on your source, but nothing from AMD's page since December 11th. I brought this up on Broken Silicon as a question, but it's worse than I ever saw. When is AMD going to, what is going on? And with AMD selling these 6000 series cards over the holidays and not giving any updates to them. Well, I mean, guys, they're just focusing on RDNA 3. Let me put down a timestamp here then. RDNA 2 drivers. So, yeah, I mean, what's going on? AMD clearly knows that RDNA 3 is not performing as well as they thought it would on average before they launched it, and they're dropping everything to focus on RDNA 3 support because they know it needs it. And I think this would also suggest they think they can scrape out some more performance from RDNA 3, which is a good thing. That's a good sign to a certain extent that AMD is dropping everything for RDNA 3 because that definitely means they think there's gas left in the tank. But it's still unacceptable that they're not updating RDNA 2. And I think an article came out today, that AMD, I think it was Frank Azor, said on Twitter that you will get an RDNA 2 update in the next 2 weeks. So it's coming. And I think this will be long forgotten pretty quickly. But I still think it's pretty stupid. There's no way around it. AMD's drivers continue to improve. I just tested an RX 6700. It was rock solid for me. I didn't have any issues. Uh, but whatever AMD's doing, they need to continue to try to improve because this is pretty unacceptable. RDNA 3 is clearly needs it needs to be fixed in drivers to give it at least another 10 to 20% performance. Give us the performance they promised us at the announcement. And RDNA 2 should have never had this happen when they sold so much RDNA 2 over the holidays. It's just stupid, but I think it will be solved soon and they should never let this happen again. It's really all I can say about that. Okay, let's see. Let me get through some of these tipped questions. Hit the like button, everybody. Got over 1,000 people watching. Let's get to 1,000 likes and click the links in the description for Micro Centers. Let me see here. Oops. As usual, YouTube scroll back. Let me see here. Du-du-du. Enigma writes in, any feedback on One API? Intel keeps talking about it. I don't have anything to add about One API except listen to the Wendell episode. Wendell was just on Broken Silicon a couple weeks ago, and I think that was actually one of the best episodes. So I think that's Broken Silicon 189. Go check that out. And remember, if you support us on Patreon, you could have asked him questions. You could have asked him about One API. And also, you can ask Daniel Nenny about One API as well. He's the founder of SemiWiki.com. The next Broken Silicon guest. Join the Patreon. You can ask him questions right now. Scott Birkinshaw writes in and says, I've had a 6800 XT for 2 years. Crash, BS, even RMA, did all the troubleshooting you imagine, and I switched to a 4080. No more issues. What the F? Will Lisa give Radeon more resources for? Yeah, I think so. I can't say I had any trouble. Throughout the past 2 years, I've tried like a dozen RDNA 2 and Ampere graphics cards, and I can't say I had any driver issues with RDNA 2. So I don't know. I don't know what to say to you. That sucks. Um, and it happens. I remember I switched to AMD for a while because Thereme's drivers were such garbage, which is verified. Google it. A leaked Microsoft crash report showed Nvidia's drivers 10 years ago just were constantly crashing. But it happens. Most people don't have driver issues. And hey, if you're happy with whatever you bought, then you're happy. Ron Jocker Patel says, I don't understand why you don't like Intel. What do you mean? Intel right here. Intel. My laptop's Intel. I might get a Meteor Lake laptop. I don't have a problem with Intel. I don't. Most of my systems are Intel. I'm just not a liar. Like Raja Kadori lied to you, and I'm not one of those people with Intel's wafer in their mouth, covering up Intel's lies and getting mad at me that I told you guys Intel lied to you about Alchemist. They did. XG's been canceled. So I don't hate Intel. I just hate the cover-ups. And I own plenty of Intel products. Chris Tam writes and he says, need a new workstation pretty soon, and AMD seems to be perennially neglecting Threadripper. They are. Is it worth grabbing an SP workstation instead in April if they're better than Threadripper 5000? Well, I mean, let me write down a timestamp for this. This is a good question. SPR workstation. Yeah, so I've been leaking, Fishhawk Falls, Sapphire Rapids workstation chips for, I think, at least a year now, if you can believe it. They've got a monolithic 24 core coming, eventually a monolithic 34 core near the end of the year, I think. They've got 56 core workstation chips coming. I think they've got the dual, I leaked there was a dual socket one, coming as well. Of course, that'll use a boatload of energy, but should you wait for AMD? Honestly, my answer is no. Everything I've been told about Threadripper workstation is that the Zen 4 Threadrippers, they'll be lucky to come in Q4 this year, and that a lot of roadmaps point to it possibly slipping to Q1 2024. So should you wait for Threadripper? No. Like, if Sapphire Rapids workstation is reasonably priced and meets your needs better than AMD, then get Sapphire Rapids. To the person who said I hate Intel, I don't. I'm telling this person AMD has neglected Threadripper. If for the price it's better, get it. The only thing I will say is temper your expectations, Chris Tam. Like, all AMD would need to do to take a lot of sales away from Sapphire Rapids workstation right now is launch a Zen 3 X3D 64 core Threadripper for a reasonable price. And for a lot of people, that'll be better than a 56 core Golden Cove. 64 core Zen 4 X3D or Sapphire Rapids that will use more energy and a lot of tests not be better and cost more. Like,
Look at the cost of Sapphire Rapids. I think it has 1600 millimeters squared of 10 nanometer silicon. It's an expensive chip. So don't doubt the chance that AMD could just launch a Milan X version of Threadripper now that will cost half as much as Sapphire Rapids or something, and then it'll be stupid, you know. But I don't think they'll go completely crazy. I'm just not 100% sure. And, if Intel launches a 56 core Sapphire Rapids that is the same price as like 64 core Milan and there's no other answer from AMD, if it's the same price, I get Sapphire Rapids. I absolutely would. And if their 24 core Fishhawk Falls is like 2 grand or something, then yeah, that's probably bet. And it has a ton of IO, which it should. Like, yeah, that's better than what AMD's got. And just get that. And I wouldn't wait, because I think outside of some surprise announcements, I think Zen 4, the full like Zen 4 Threadripper isn't coming until quarter 4 at the soonest. And time is money if you actually use your workstation for work. Um, Jason Wilson writes in and says, "Why is everyone freaking out about AMD shipping less units like they're trying to price hike? Is that the standard SOP of other companies?" Well, they're not trying to price hike. Honestly, guys, it was a slow news week and a bunch of websites did clickbait. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's all I can say. AMD has said publicly they're trying to everything that they're trying to take market share. I've been told they're trying to take market share. They are trying to take market share. It takes 6 weeks to ship something by boat. They undershipped because they thought demand would be lower, and it's going to continue to be a little undershipped in quarter 1 because any chips they would have shipped for quarter 1, guys, would have been shipped in quarter 4. So it's too late to adjust it. That's it. And they had oversupply in parts of their channel anyways that they were trying to clear so that they could have clear channels and then strategically ship what they need where they need to throughout the year. This is just standard channel clearing, and there's a bunch of misleading headlines. So AMD trying to keep prices high. I'm sorry, can I say this? If AMD is trying to keep prices high, why the fuck is the 7900 XT $900 from AMD.com? Why the fuck did they just drop the price on the 6950 XT? Why is Zen 4 cheaper than Raptor Lake? AMD, if AMD is trying to keep prices high, they failed. It's just defies logic, these articles claiming AMD's trying to hike prices when their prices are lower right now. So then they failed at it. Like, what's your point? Like, I don't know, guys. Don't reward clickbait. That's all. It's a slow news week. What do you want me to say? I mean, honestly, the more I think about it, that's so funny. If they're trying to keep prices high, why do they drop prices? What the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Oh man, that's funny. I don't know. Why do some people not have brain cells? That's all I can say. David Sebastian writes in and says, "Hey Tom, for gamers that sadly depend on single core, how will a 12 or 16 core X3D chip know which core to utilize?" Oh, I like this question. Let me write down a timestamp for that. 132. Yeah. Zen for X3D core utilization. So, hey Tom, for gamers that depend on 12 or 16 cores with X3D chips, how will the Windows know which core to utilize? The one that boosts higher or the CCD that has access to all the cache? It seems problematic. Well, I mean, we're gonna have to wait for reviews. I mean, who knows? If AMD fails, I'll do a video saying don't buy this. But at the end of the day, Intel's had Alder Lake working mostly fine since 2021, right? 2021? 2021. And Alder Lake has big cores, little cores, and hyperthreading. And Windows needs to know when to send a task to the big core, the little core, or the second thread on a big core, and when to choose the highest boosting big core. Right now, I have a 5950X that I got for cheap over the holidays. And just like with my 3950X, you can see it strategically choosing the core that boosts the highest for the most important thread for a game. So they're already doing it. Already, Zen 3, Zen 4, Zen 2 is choosing the right core for the right task. Right now, Alder Lake's already choosing between 3 different types of cores. Why can't AMD do it? It's really no different, Um, is there more to it when one of them has extra cache versus when one of them boosts higher? I don't know why that's really any different than big and little. So all I can say is this an avenue where something could go wrong? Yes, and that's why you got to wait for reviews. Do I think this seems like something that's unsolvable? No, it's been solved 2 years ago, guys. So, no. We'll see, but I think if it works properly, then, you get the best of both worlds. You get a few, you get like 6 or 8 cores with Vcache that are great at gaming. And then when you're doing multi-threading or when you're doing a task that um or when you're doing a task that needs high single threading performance but doesn't need cache as much, boom, you can still boost to 5.7 gigahertz. It's the best of both worlds. So, as long as it works, we'll have to wait for reviews. Um, Carbon Cry writes in, "Why do you hate AMD? You just recommended Sapphire Rapids." I think he's making fun of the other people that say I hate Intel after just recommending Intel. Hey guys, I just recommend what I think is the best thing. And if I think AMD is in a given month, I recommend that. Intel, Nvidia, I own stuff from all of these companies. Jackal N writes in and says, I've been waiting 6 months plus for the prices to bottom out. How long do you think it'll be the best time to commit, especially in this slowing market? Let me put down a timestamp for that. Best time to buy. So, um, how long do you think it's? Yeah. So, I mean, I remember when 3090s were $800 on eBay. And I remember when the 6700 was getting cheaper. Right now, the RX 6700, I believe, is $320 on Newegg. That's a good deal. I like the RX 6700 10 gigabyte. That's like a great 4K 60 or 1440p 120 hertz card, or 1080p 240 hertz. And I tested it. I actually love the card. Uses almost no energy, 10 gigabytes of RAM, more than enough for 1440p, but you're not wasting money on more RAM than you need. I think it's great. But all of these cards are changing price over time. There's always a best card of the month to buy. So if I look for 3090s now, oh no, they're getting under $800 again. Oh wow, here's a 3090 with a triple fan cooler for 720. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. You look at that in the 6950 XT. If you need CUDA, I still think like $700-800 3090s that are used is a good move. As long as it's a reliable seller. And then like 30 let me see, 3060 Ti, I remember, was a good thing to buy for a while there. So the 3060 Ti is going for, yeah, like $300 on Newegg. I don't know. From where I'm sitting, it just depends on what you want. Because the best value card to get any given week or month now fluctuates a bit. And like, so to answer your question, Jackal, are you doing a budget build? If you're doing a budget build, you can go to Micro Center right now and get a 7700X with 32 gigabytes of 6000 DDR5 free. So you're basically getting the 7700X for $200, and they give you $20 off a motherboard. Yeah, I'm plugging the description links, but still, like, that's true. So then you get the CPU that, I mean, it's conceivable you could get that and then get like a used 3060 Ti and you have like a $600 build that's pretty good. So I think in the mid range, the time to wait is done. Like there's fantastic deals. In fact, what's the 3060 getting to? That was getting to some silly prices too. Yeah, that's getting to like 250. And then what about the 3050? I don't think they made too many of those though. TX30, no, 3050 eBay. Yeah, 3050 is not one to go for. I think I heard though that like GTX 1070s were becoming dirt cheap. Is that true? Yeah, they are. 1070 Ti for 160, GTX 1070 for 130. If you're doing a bare bones budget build, you could conceivably get like an RX 7600, or I'm sorry, R5 7600 from Micro Center and get like, I think they're giving away free RAM at Micro Center now with the 7600X too, aren't they? Let me see. R5 7600. It's like it all just depends. Like the 7600 doesn't come with one, but does the R5 7600X? It does. The 7600X comes with, okay, it's 16 gigabytes, but still, so you're basically getting the 7600X for like $150, 150 for the RAM. So yeah, like, and then $20 off a motherboard. I don't know, guys. It's conceivable you could do like a 1070 7600 system, 7600X system for like $400 or something, right? Or $500. Like, so if you're doing low end, mid range right now is the time to build. If you're waiting for high end stuff, it depends. Is it mid range high end? Like, are you thinking of getting a 6800X? Because if you're looking to get a 6800X, I think right now the high end is starting to become really reasonable. Yeah, like $500 for a 6800 XT. That's crazy. Um, so I don't know. I think that the high end still has a bit to go. If you're waiting to get like a 4090 or like a 7900 XTX, I would suspect those prices will drift a little lower in a month. But if you're doing low end, I'd say now's the time. So I think that was it's a pretty full answer there. Let me see. Gladic Satic says, "Why do you hate Intel and AMD, you arm simp?" This is joking. Thank you for the tip and the joke, Gladic. Ricardo Lopez says, "How long will AMD keep making the 5800 X3D?" Well, so for the 5800 X3D, you guys got to remember that they're going to have to keep making Zen 3 X3D Milan X for customers for years, right? Because they have to have some replacement parts for their customers, for Epic, for server. Those are the same chiplets used for the 5800 X3D. So I think it's entirely conceivable that AMD makes like a handful of stuff. Probably the 5900X, the 5800 X3D, and then like I don't know, a 5700 or something in 5600X or 5600 for the next 2 years, because they're always gonna have some extra yields that don't go into Milan X replacement parts that could go into this. What I'm particularly curious about is if they would ever launch a Zen 3 part on AM5, because 'cause it'd be pretty crazy if they had like a 5800 X3D, uh, AM5 edition for like 250 or something. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? But, I don't think there's any evidence they're gonna stop making this for a little bit here. I don't know that there will always be a lot of supply, though. I'll warn you there. I don't know that there will always be tons of supply. The longer Zen 4 is out, the longer Zen 3 is only being produced for replacement parts. That means they will trickle in here and there. But I think that it's conceivable there could be new ones made in low quantities for years. Um, Christmas Crustacean writes in and says, "Imagine if AMD launched a 32 core Zen 3 X3D Threadripper on the TRX4 platform just to give the finger to Intel." I mean, they could though. That's the thing, and it wouldn't be that expensive for them. That's why I say, if AMD really feels threatened in Threadripper, they'll do that. Now, the question is if that makes any sense, because when people look to get Sapphire Rapids, I assume it's for a pretty specific task, because at the end of the day, Zen 3 is just going to be cheaper for multi-threading performance. And because Zen 3 just uses so much less energy, they can afford to boost them high enough for the multi-threading performance will probably be competitive with Sapphire Rapids Workstation. No, it won't be competitive in single threading, but this is where AMD would probably walk in and say, "Who's buying Threadripper for single threading? We win single threading. Get AM5. If you want multi-threading, I think AMD thinks they're already kind of competitive with Sapphire Rapids. But if they ever feel threatened, they could totally launch a 32 core X3D chip. Uh, I just don't know that they actually think there's any need to. Denvera G1 says, "I'm not saying these articles are correct, but lower prices doesn't mean they wouldn't try. It would just mean the price doesn't fall as much." Well, whatever, dude. AMD's lowered prices more than their competitors. So any argument that they're trying to keep prices high is based on this much evidence. Zero. Um, and it's just clickbait. Uh, SJ Niao writes, "Navi 32 predictions. The 7900 XT is barely faster than the 6950 XT. That's not entirely true. Let me go RX70. Well, let's just do this. RTX 4070 Ti review at TechSpot. The hardware unbox will be coming on Broken Silicon again soon, guys. So that'll be fun. But we're gonna wait for a couple more releases. It's been a while though since and Tim have been on, so I'm looking forward to that. Let's see. Okay, so right. So if I look at the 4K average for the 7900 XT and the 4070 Ti from Hardware Unboxed, the 7900 XT is 13% or something faster than a 6950 XT. So it's conceivable. Navi 32. Let's see. Like, if they clock Navi 32 to 3 gigahertz, which let's not double down yet, but it's totally plausible. If they clock Navi 32 to 3 gigahertz, isn't that like 20% at least faster than the 7900 XT? So I don't know. I think it's entirely plausible then if they do that, that they could have something that's like 15% weaker and just is a 6950 XT. Um, and he says there's a small gap between the 6950 XT and the 6800 XT. No, there's not. The 6900 XT was 10% better than the 6800 XT, and the 6950 XT added another like 11% on that. It's like 20% better at least, the 6950 XT. The 6950 XT has faster Infinity Fabric clocks as well to do that. So, no, I think what you're gonna see is probably a 7800 XT that's 10 to 20% weaker than the 7900 XT, and that'll place it pretty much right next to the 6950 XT. A little weaker than the 4070 Ti, but I think it's gonna be a lot cheaper and have more RAM. Um, we'll have to see, we'll have to see. Obviously, AMD's fallen short before, but that's totally plausible. It doesn't have to suck, guys. Superman writes in, thank you for the tip. He says, I know it's BS, my guy, but but is Sony really going to release a PS5 Pro by April? I saw YouTube and even well-known creators passing around. Well, there's well-known creators that say a bunch of bullshit, so I don't know what that means. He says, naturally, I come to you for the info. Um, you can expect me to look into more console stuff in about a week or two. Before the PSVR 2 comes out, I'm trying to organize a special guest to then like do like a roundtable on consoles, because I really do think I basically ignored console information last year because there's just too much PC gaming information to leak and talk about. But I want to get back into talking about console a little bit here. I think the PS5, I think Angstronomics / Sky Juice already confirmed the PS5 is on 6 nanometer. There should be a PS5 Slim coming very soon. I'm actually surprised it didn't launch sooner. I've known about the PS5 Slim for a while. Maybe I should put on my PlayStation lights here. Let me even put on a timestamp. It's probably about time for that. PS5 Pro. I'm also like really surprised an Xbox Slim and 6 nanometer refresh isn't out yet. I heard it was supposed to come out late last year. I don't know what happened to that. But I think there's going to be some Slim and console releases this year, and it's exciting. Do I think a PS5 Pro is coming in 2 months? I don't know. At the risk of not having looked into this at all, it doesn't seem likely to me. Um, and I will say this, as much as I will promise you 100%, because I know from talking to a couple sources that Sony designed or did so at least lay the groundwork for a PS5 Pro, and Xbox has been looking into it as well. That doesn't mean they're going to launch it. And I have always thought it would be silly to launch a PS5 Pro if you could just launch a PS6 like 5 years later. Like, so what? We're in 2023. PlayStation 5 came out in 2020. Why launch a PS5 Pro now? That would presumably use like RDNA 3 or some 2 plus 3 plus thing. Maybe it could be RDNA 3 plus or some version of RDNA 4. I guess they have launched stuff to consoles first before. But why would AMD do that now? I mean, why would Sony do that now if they could launch a PS6 based on like RDNA 5 in 2025? Like, why? Why? Like, the PS5 is selling great. We're in a recession. Does anyone? Because let's be honest, a PS5 Pro is probably going to be $600. Is that what consumers want? I still play my PS5 every now and then, and I think the graphics are fine, and I think they're more than good enough for most people. Like God of War's like 1440p 90 hertz mode is awesome. And I see no evidence that that's not good enough. I don't know anyone that owns a next gen console like a Series X and PS5 and is like, oh, these graphics aren't good enough for me to enjoy it. I don't know. All I can say is if we were still in a booming market where everything sells, makes a lot of sense for Sony to launch that PS5 Pro. But otherwise, I think you just wait for like an RDNA 5 console to come out into 2025 that's backwards compatible. Like, why do these iterative upgrades if you hit a level of performance that's good enough? Just drop the price and keep selling them. Like, you make money on the software anyways. Those are my thoughts for now, but you can expect way more in-depth thoughts probably in a couple weeks from me. So just a little too early to ask. Lebu writes in, which memory timing is best for AMD? 6,000 mega transfer per second. The tightest ones. Sorry, that's really the best answer I have. What's the best timings? The tightest you can get overclocking, and tuning them. Got another console question here. Let's see. Let's refresh. Michael Mooney writes in and says, would Xbox or PlayStation benefit more from an RDNA 3 style multi-chip redesign without any other changes? That's hard to say. I guess that's the one thing I haven't thought about is if an RDNA 3 or even RDNA 2 plus console might be worth doing just to save on silicon costs. Like, put some of it on 5 nanometer, some of it on 6 nanometer. That's an interesting question. But who would benefit more? Because it's like if I think about this question, it's like I have to consider, would Microsoft want to have some modular approach where the Series S, like a new version of the Series S, uses like one graphics chiplet, the Series X uses two? That's food for thought. I don't know if AMD's architecture is quite there yet with RDNA 4, though. It should be, but I don't know if it's there yet for like an RDNA 3 Plus. So I don't know if that really applies here. With Sony, I don't know. I'd say they would both benefit if it was used properly, but don't underestimate the fact that monolithic makes sense if it's a smaller than like, I think it seems pretty obvious that if you're below 350 millimeter squared ish, monolithic just makes sense on TSMC because of how good their yields are. So to be honest with you, I would kind of still expect them to use a non-chiplet approach for now. Oh, there goes Jesse. But I don't think there's like one would benefit more right now. The Series S makes me think about it, but YS Mail says, hey man, do you know anything about Bloodborne on PS5? No, except that I'm blown away it's not out yet. I don't know what to tell you. There's a lot of games that I leaked, that I'm just like, I wonder if they went into development hell. No. To be honest, I haven't asked though for like a year, so it's really the wrong time to ask me about it, but let's see. So that's all the tipped questions. We do also have one more Patreon question here that I want to get through. XPK 2004-0228 writes in and says, considering the disappointing leak for the 780M iGPU, he says time spy score was less than 3,000. Is RDNA 3 in Phoenix with the 780M nearly no improvement at all compared to the 680M? Or is its drivers not ready? I thought the 780M might be able to match the 1060M at first, but it looks like I need to lower that expectation. Well, just remember that no synthetic benchmark is the end all be all. And I believe the Rembrandt APU, they compared it to the 1650 Max Q with FSR. What that really means is Rembrandt had the performance of a 1050 Ti. Now, I don't know what you saw, XPK, but in that leak, the 780M was like 25% better than the 680M, which means 25% better than like a desktop 1050 Ti. That sounds pretty close to a laptop 1060 to me. And we don't know what TDP it was at. Was it at 15 watts, 25 watts, 35 watts? Are the drivers done? I suspect that Phoenix at like 65 to 95 watts is when you're going to see that big increase in graphics performance over the Rembrandt, because at a certain point you're just throttling. So I don't know. I think it's going to be at the extremes, like 95 watts, and maybe at the lower ones just because it's 4 nanometer as well. But I don't know. It doesn't look bad to me, and I don't know what you expected. I know there were some people peddling this absurd narrative that Phoenix was like what did they say? It was a 3060. I always said that was never going to happen, never going to be close to a 3060. And if it falls short or not, you should have never expected that level of performance. And it's not chiplets either, yet people keep clicking on those people. I don't know. I'd say as long as the 780M is at least 20% or so better, that's good. But I gotta say, I was told, I will tell you this, the design goal, not the bullshit ones, they were never going to beat the 3060. AMD's original design goals for Phoenix's integrated graphics were about, let's say 40 to 60% better than Rembrandt. So they weren't trying to beat a 3060, but they were definitely trying to get to about a 590, like an RX 590. And if they don't hit that, at least at certain TDP levels, that'll be real disappointing. But that's really all I have to say about it. It will be disappointing if they don't manage to do that. But from what we've seen, RDNA 3 is very much so up in the air. And we need to wait for Phoenix, Navi 32, and Navi 33 to see if it's just Navi 31 that has issues or if it's the whole thing. So I think I just leave it at that. It's one leak, it's an early leak. And even now, in that leak, it looks like it's bringing a standard generational uplift over Rembrandt and graphics performance. So it's not as high as they tried to, if that's all it hits, but it's certainly not abnormal performing. Edgar Vasquez writes in and says, "Hey man, always love your content. Thank you. I'm skipping this generation of Nvidia cards and waiting until the next one. How long do you think I will have to wait? And why is that card going to have a TDP? No cards having a 1000 watt freaking TDP, guys. God, those are such bullshit rumors. How long are you gonna have to wait for next gen? I mean, I think at least a year. There's a chance you could see a Lovelace refresh at the end of this year, depending on if Nvidia thinks they need to realign their entire lineup. And there's definitely a chance of Blackwell and stuff like that. But for now, I have no confirmation on an RDNA 3 plus desktop lineup. Could happen, but I have no proof. And I would just say don't expect a new generation for at least a year and a half. Is it possible? Yes, but I don't think so right now. Especially with the recession here. Wholesome DJ Aftershock writes, and it says, I know this question may seem far out, but what do you expect top-end GPUs 5 years from now to look like in terms of packaging and accelerators? Oh, good Lord. What do I expect out of GPUs in 5 years? So like 2028? I mean, I would expect dedicated upscaling accelerators. I would, dedicated ray tracing accelerators. And I mean, I think name whatever you're thinking of right now. It'll be doable. I think RDNA 4, they're always trying to bring 50 to 100% more performance every gen, every 2 years now, even if it costs a lot of money. So, by 2028, 5 years from now, we'll be looking at like RDNA 6. I mean, I think you're looking at completely destroying rasterized games in 8K. And fully path traced games will be on the table. I still suspect though we're going to do a combination of ray tracing and rasterization though, because it's just more efficient. And I don't know that we're going to have ray tracing as the standard for at least a decade. But in 5 years, I think, assuming the world still exists, we're going to be, it's not going to matter. It'll be, it'll come to a point where integrated graphics, I think, on 2 nanometer do enough to for good 1080p gaming. And if you're someone that doesn't appreciate high resolutions, there's going to be a real question on if you need to get any of the new stuff. But if you want it, it's going to be there. It's just probably going to be really expensive because of the technology required to up the performance that much. Let me see. So that is all right. So that's all of those questions. Let me make sure I got through all of the Patreon questions. And we have almost gone 2 hours, so I'm almost done. I'll give it 1 more minute here to see if there's any last minute questions, just to be nice. Where did I put my... There it is. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. Any last minute questions? Let's see here. Could check the Discord too. Let's see. What about Tech Power Up and the 7900 XTX rumors? The 7990 XTX 20% performance over 4090. Yeah, I'm trying to stay away from these doubling down on any of these weird rumors out there about top end RDNA 3 stuff. Here's what I will say. We've already seen overclocked 7900 XTXs, get 3 gigahertz. Tech Power Ups benchmarked every AIB card. Now it uses 400, 450 watts, but you can do it. And it already almost ties a 4090. So think of it that way. An overclocked 7900 XTX at 420 watts ties a 4090. Okay. If AMD were to bin for that and, optimize it a little bit for that, if AMD were to also give it, maybe 24 gigabit per second GDDR6, which is a thing, that's 20% more bandwidth. Well, that's all they need. Faster GDDR6, 450 watt design, 3 8-pins. Boom, you already match a 4090. And then they can add the another 96 megabytes of V cache on top, or infinity cache. We already know that it can go up to 192 megabytes. The 7900 XTX out right now isn't even the full design. It's not the fully enabled die. It could have another layer of cache. So add all of that up, and yeah, I think you could get to something that narrowly beats the 4090 and raster. That's all I can say, though, is it's hypothetical. Does it make sense? Will it be too expensive? Does AMD think there's no market for it? Is there, an issue once you put the cache on there with cooling and that kind of negate? We'll have to see. So I wouldn't double down on anything. All I would say is I don't need a source to tell you this. We know they can add double the infinity cache. We know if you overclock the 7900 XTX right now, it can tie a 4090. Right there, that tells you there is room for a 7950 XTX that could add another 20% on top of what they have now. And that would be competitive with a 4090. It's just a matter of if they want to do it and win. Libu writes in and says, is it true that the 7900 X3D and 7950 X3D will be easier to cool than the 7800 X3D? I don't know about that. I don't, no comment. I mean, no, I just, both of them will cool fine with a decent all-in-one liquid cooler. Right? That's all I have to say. Esper Lagos writes in and says, will ARM chips rise up even further and overtake Intel and AMD anytime in our lifetime? What's our lifetime? Another 80 years, man? I can't predict what will happen in 80 years. Right now, x86 is here to stay. ARM isn't displacing it. Everyone says x86 is dead. AMD keeps taking market share. So is ARM going to continue to take some market share, take over some niches? Yes. I'm not saying ARM can't take over a lot of the market, but the time horizon for that, I mean, I don't know, dude. Let me see. Okay, so those were those final little questions there. All right, I think this is a good place to stop then. So thank you for watching. I usually try to stop at 2 hours. Hit the like button, everybody. Hit the like button. We have almost 1,000 people watching. Let's get to 1,000 likes. Check the description. Click on those links, please. If you want to support Moore's Law is Dead, click on the links in the description. That helps me so much for Micro Center. Also, check out their deals. They're giving away free RAM with the 7600X. It's crazy. And additionally, Daniel Nenny is the next guest on Broken Silicon. Support us on Patreon. Founder of SemiWiki.com. We'll be talking about AMD's earnings, Intel's earnings, Nvidia's earnings, the future of Intel and TSMC. This is an expert on silicon. You can ask him questions if you support us on Patreon. Can't do this without our patrons. You'll also get the episode early and ad free. So and Die Shrink. Die Shrink just came out. You'll get this loose ends ad free in the RSS feed. So it's all there. Tons of content. Thanks for the support, everybody, and have a good weekend.